This is
good.
the Improved Photography Podcast, episode number 173. This episode is brought to you by Improved Photography Plus. Get all of the downloadable products on Improved Photography, all in one subscription for $19.95 a month, and support the podcast. In addition to dozens of hours of video content, you also get hundreds of Lightroom presets, sky replacements, ebooks, photography contracts, and of course, first crack at our free workshops. In fact, we just announced one this week for Glacier National Park in Montana, September 14 to 17. So check that out if you're an Improved Photography Plus subscriber. Welcome back to the Improved Photography Podcast, your weekly dose of photography knowledge. And today I am joined by a new voice on the podcast. Stephen, welcome to the show. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself in a couple sentences and tell us about you?
Yeah, hi, Jim. First of all, I've been listening to you forever, and I'm so happy to be on the show. I've been a freelance photographer in Connecticut, so I haven't heard too much from people in the Northeast. So representing New York and Boston, we're right in the middle, and
shout out to Connecticut.
Yay! Have you ever been this way?
No, I haven't actually. I have severely neglected that whole area of the United States, and I need to correct it.
Well, we looked into Boise, and your area there is really gorgeous. You have a beautiful town there, city.
Well, thank you.
So anyway, yeah, I'm a freelance photographer. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've been kind of shooting all different things. And so I shoot for a business journal. I shoot for colleges, universities, banks. I shoot for a business journal, a weekly business journal. So that gets my name out there. And then the other total different side is that I do hospitality. I've been working with Marriott, and particularly one brand, the Renaissance brand, for maybe 15 years, and travel all over the country, and recently even out of the country, to photograph hotel interiors. And so I'm having a ball.
Well, great. That's exciting. We're anxious to hear a little bit more about that hospitality photography in a little bit. But first, we have some questions from readers of Improved Photography. The first question is, what is the correct DPI to use when I save my photos? It seems like some places want 300 DPI, others want 150 DPI, and others 72 DPI. I'll tackle this one because this is a really complicated subject, and I spent like 3 work days once just trying to understand what this means because it's very, very complicated. Every time I've explained this principle before, I have a certain subset of the listeners who say, no, there's no way that's right. And I promise you this is how it works. So the DPI setting never, ever makes any difference whatsoever if you're saving a file that's going to be viewed on a computer. You can enter 999 in the DPI setting. You can enter 1 in the DPI setting. It will not change anything at all if you're viewing that photo on a computer. The reason is your computer has the number of pixels per inch fixed. It's like an actual physical part of the screen. You have little lights in there, right? Tiny little lights everywhere on the screen, those tiny pixels. And you can enter 300 DPI, and it's not like all of a sudden your screen morphs into having those lights closer together. And if you enter 1, they just morph out. That number is completely and totally arbitrary if you're viewing the photo on a computer. So if you want to test this, if this seems too crazy to believe, go into Photoshop and try, when you're saving out a photo, try enter 999 as your DPI setting, and then save that same photo out with the number being 1. And when you do that, you'll see, first of all, that the file size is exactly the same. And then you'll view the photos, and they look exactly the same. And the reason is you can't change the actual size of the pixels in the screen, or the density of those pixels. Where this does make a difference, however, is when we are putting this on, when we're actually printing the photo. Because let's say we're saving a file out, when we save it out in Photoshop or Lightroom and we're asking for that DPI, let's say we make a photo just for easiness of numbers. It's 1,000 pixels wide and 500 pixels tall. Well, your printer needs to know what dimensions you want to print this out to. And they want to know, should we push the pixels close together or far apart? Because unlike your computer screen, they can actually change that, right? And so there, it's taking the DPI number and multiplying it by the width and height to know if you're printing an 8x10 or 11x16 or whatever size A3 if you're in Europe, however you want to express this. It's determining the size from that. So that's where it is important to set the DPI setting is when you're printing. On the screen, this just doesn't matter. Did I miss anything, Stephen? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Jim, when I'm looking at the question that he's asking is how I would save them. And I think that's what I would say is I would keep the resolution when I'm saving my images as high as they started off. I wouldn't fractal them up and I wouldn't make them smaller, but I would absolutely store them in a TIFF or Photoshop as a Photoshop document and not in a JPEG form. So when I start my image and do all my work on it, I want to store those in the highest resolution possible and label them accordingly, and then make sure that they're not JPEG.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you want to save them in a high resolution if you aren't already saving the RAW. So when you go on the computer from now on, do this just to have a little fun. Just to have fun. When you're saving that file out, enter a random number. Type your birth year in there. Pick your favorite number. It's just not going to matter. For years and years and years, photographers were told that if you're saving the photo for the web, you have to make it 72 DPI because that used to be the dots per inch on a screen. And it's just that advice comes from somebody who doesn't quite understand how this works. First of all, screens are much higher DPI than 72 now. But even then, it never made sense to do this because it never actually changed how the file was viewed. All right, rant completed. All right, the next question comes from Tim Gifford, who says, should I learn Photoshop? He just converted to Lightroom CC, and he's got Photoshop now included for free in his subscription. And he's never used Photoshop, and he's basically wondering what kind of common edits you would use in Photoshop. Is it worth diving in and trying to learn it? What do you think, Stephen?
Oh my God. I mean, that's where you start. What kind of question is that? Yeah, I think, I know it's a Lightroom world out there. I actually still use Bridge and have just converted over to Lightroom. So I know one of your callers, one of your guests a couple weeks ago actually used Bridge as well. But for somebody to start and learn both Bridge or Lightroom, Bridge is actually, to me, a little easier to start with. But to convert images and to not do that is just you're missing half the fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of edits would you use in Photoshop regularly? Like what's the incentive? If you're already using Lightroom, you got your, you feel comfortable with Lightroom, what would you use in Photoshop?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Versus, yeah. Well, it's getting to a point now where Photoshop itself is less and less needed. But I find that for doing architectural clone, moving things, layers, there's just certain things I'm maybe more comfortable, but I don't think I can do multiple layered images, bringing certain subjects up and down in Lightroom or Bridge. So I start with retouching. To me, retouching is still an area where I work on the face in Photoshop. So those are two areas I would say. I almost always go into Photoshop and do a little bit extra.
Yeah, so I guess for somebody who doesn't quite understand the difference between Lightroom and Photoshop and maybe asking this question, anytime you want to add something new to the picture, you want to replace a sky, you want to add a sky to a photo that wasn't there, that has to be in Photoshop. Lightroom can't do that because it doesn't have layers. Anytime you want to change the basic character of the photo, you want to remove an entire person from a photo, that has to be done in Photoshop. That you've got to have layers to do that. And so, you can remove a pimple in Lightroom. You can remove a whole person, a whole building. You can totally change the character of a photo in Photoshop. If you're interested sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm saying, yeah, it's funny. I hear people saying that there's more and more I can just do in Lightroom, and I barely go into Photoshop. But every headshot I've ever done, they have flyaway hairs. They have things that you really just can't do in Lightroom. And you go into Photoshop, you keep it, you start with it as a tip, and you go through, and the tools that they have for that, such as the patch tool, are just very, very handy and really necessary. So Photoshop is not dead.
No, not at all. I would say Lightroom is for organization, it's for stylization of a photo, and very minor retouching. Photoshop is for the normal retouching and changing the character of the photo, adding text to the photo. It's all that kind of more in-depth stuff. And I definitely think Photoshop is a worthwhile skill. I also recognize that a good majority of the improved photography audience neglects Photoshop because we love Lightroom. A lot of people get comfortable in Lightroom first. It's easier to work in Lightroom. And then Photoshop is always kind of put on the back burner. And so if you're interested in diving into Photoshop, there are a lot of different ways you can learn it. Just head over to YouTube and you're going to find a ton of tutorials on how to use Photoshop. But if you want to learn it a lot faster and you don't want to bang your head on the table for the next 6 months because you've missed important steps, go to Improve Photography Plus. Use that 2-week free trial. And we have Photoshop 101 and Photoshop 102 that will walk you in an organized way right through Photoshop. You could be up to speed using it at a competent level in 2 weeks from now if you learn it in a good organized way. All right.
Yeah, and Jim, I found that people who are overwhelmed by Photoshop, when you actually figure the tools that you use, we all have, there's 3 or 4 different ways to do a lot of things, but when you find the tools that you like and get comfortable with them, it's really not that bad. There's all kinds of other options you can do that you'll have to watch a tutorial on, but the actual tools that you use over and over again, it's something we can all learn pretty quickly.
Yep, I totally agree with that. You can spend your whole life and not know everything there is to know about Photoshop, but you can get competent with it in a couple weeks if you're learning it well. The next question comes from Justin Gill, who says he has a 70 Mark II and it has an extra memory card slot, which he has never ever used. And so why would someone want an extra memory card slot? What do you think?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm probably not the one to ask because one of the ways that people use that is a backup in case your card messes up. And I have had one card in 20 years fail, or 16 years in digital fail. So I don't use it for that. I use it when I'm running out of space, but now with these big 64 gig cards, I don't use it. I like the SD cards, and I think that people use it mostly as a backup when they're worried that the card will fail.
Yeah, most people do use it as a backup worrying the card will fail. I guess a caution on that. Often a card failure is not a problem with the card itself. Sometimes it's the camera that has actually failed and it just wrote that error to the card. So not every time that we see something wrong with the card does it mean the card was actually bad. There could be a number of causes for that. And so I don't think we can rely on just having a second card in your card slot and saying, now I'm good. I have 2 cards in here. I can shoot the whole wedding and have it backing up continuously, having it write each picture to both cards, and I'm set. Well, that would be fine if the card were the only thing that could fail in that system. But there's a common denominator, the camera, that could fail and mess up 2 cards at once. And so while I do think it's a great practice and very, very handy to have 2 card slots, and you might as well be writing them to 2 when you're shooting something mission critical like a wedding, it doesn't mean you are all good. It's not a panacea for your problems. When I shoot a wedding, every like 15 to 20 minutes, I take out the card and I switch to a new card. And then as soon as there's a break in the event, I download all the cards to a laptop that I bring with me. And so the very most that I could lose when I'm shooting a wedding is 15 to 20 minutes of coverage. When I'm at the reception, I'm not going to switch every 15 minutes. I'm going to, switch 2 or 3 times during the whole reception. But during the wedding ceremony, during very important parts, when I'm getting the formals of the couple on the wedding day, the group photos that we've just got everybody together for, I'm going to be switching cards pretty regularly to make sure that I don't mess that up. What's kind of your process to make sure you don't mess that up, Stephen?
I think I've heard this discussion on your show, and I'm kind of the opposite.
You run fast and loose because you've only had one problem in 25 years.
I know, and one could go over those. I think a lot of the problems that happen with cards where you have that issue might have to do with turning the camera off, pulling your card out, some kind of an interruption on that card while it's writing, and not even blaming it on the card. But I'm sure there's people out there that have had horrible stories, and I'm just not one of them. But to me, pulling out your card and worrying about it halfway through an event, and maybe you forgot did I load that? Did I not load it? To me, one card, leave it in there. I know at the end of I had one time where I had 2 weddings in one day, and they were all on one card. And for a second there at the end of that day, when I was like putting it in the computer, I'm like, oh my God, what? That's a crazy amount of information. And then it pops up, there's that EOS symbol, and God bless. And that's been working for me so far for 16 years. But
you
to
don't
me,
wear a seatbelt either, do you?
No. To me, there's more human error by pulling that card in and out than doing that. I also use 2 camera bodies, so there's that. But so far, so good. But I get you. You're probably much more rational in that respect.
It's the whole attorney thing. The risk averse is, most people have a certain aversion to risk, and when you're an attorney, it just like quadruples. It just goes to the insane levels.
Well,
but this happened to me.
Yeah.
I screwed this up not so long ago. I photographed a wedding. It was the reception. Everything was going good. I photographed the whole reception, got some great photos. Right the instant that the bride turns her back, throws the bouquet, I can remember looking through the viewfinder and seeing the photo and think, dang, that was cool. Because I got the bride kind of her back turned, and then all the girls, scrambling, trying to grab the flowers out of the air. And like, I took the picture, I saw it in the viewfinder, I tilt the camera down to chimp, I press play, look at it, card error. And I lost everything from the reception. And so I didn't trust the camera anymore. I literally ran around the reception with my cell phone, snapping wildly photos of the cake, photos of everything, people that were there, grabbing it in the last seconds because I thought, no, I have to have something from the reception. It can happen. And while it may be very rare, we've all seen the photographers that got sued because they lost mission critical information. And so it's just I totally get what you're saying about the human error. It's totally there as well. It's just a matter of what kind of risk you want to take on and where you think the mistake is most likely to come. But Jim, those are some things to consider.
You double your chance of having a card go bad when you have 2 cards.
How's that?
I have 1 card. You have 2 cards. One of them, you have a 100%, 50% more chance of a card failing. You have another card that could fail. I only have 1.
We could argue the logic of that, but okay. All right. Tim Evans asks, just curious if anyone has stopped purchasing from B&H due to the recent allegations against them. No, I have not. So B&H is a popular camera retailer in the United States. I'm not sure how popular they are overseas. Um, and they have had a number of allegations against them with different things. Um, one of them being the labor issues that they have, saying that they're underpaying their workers and things like that. Um, what I say is that any business, no matter how well and morally it is run, will be sued once it gets large enough. Every single business of size, that is going to happen. It just will. It's just a fact. And so I never worry about this kind of thing. I read through a lot of the comments of some of the allegations against them and was very underwhelmed as to what of some of the things that were alleged against them. I guess the thing that I always wonder is, I hear somebody that says, I've worked here for 35 years and they're not paying me enough and I keep getting injured on the job, and I always think, go find another company to work for. Why have you still worked there for 35 years if it's so horrible? This is a big country. There isn't just one place you can work for. And I understand that some element of that is unfair, but I don't know. I read through a lot of it, and it seemed like an attorney found somebody to sue. So that's kind of my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on that, Stephen?
Yeah, well, I love getting the boxes. The only thing I can say, I do try to help the local guys. I know Canon, their prices are exactly the same whether I buy from our local camera store, as they are at B&H. They've kept the prices exactly the same, and so I try to give our camera store some work. But boy, B&H is quick, and I call it in one day, and the next day I got the box. They're just very good at it. Their customer service. I've called them and asked them which umbrella would be best, and they spend as much time as you want. So I like them. There's other companies as well that do a pretty good job in New York.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of different things that B&H and every big company has faced. In addition to the labor disputes and the lawsuit that came, I guess that was 3 or 4 months ago, they're also being sued by the government for discrimination in their hiring practices. And again, all I can say here is that when you're a big company, there are a lot of people that have a target on your back, and also there are a lot of hoops to jump through in the business world to get everything right. And once you pass that 500 employee mark, things like government restrictions on making sure you're hiring correct numbers and things of different races and cultures and men and women and all kinds of things, it can be very difficult to get right. And so I have more sympathy than anything else for B&H. And so, no, I wouldn't even come close to changing my buying habits because of that. Having said that, it's rare that I order something from B&H. I almost always get it from Amazon. It's easier, it's faster, and I get better shipping and a better return policy, and they're always open. Anyway, all right. So we had some great questions this week come in from listeners of Improved Photography. But Stephen, you do some hotel photography, photographing for a hotel chain. And so tell us a little bit about how you got that gig, what you charge for something like that, and what a typical shoot is like.
Yeah, it was funny because I started as really a photojournalist, and I was totally into people. I was a people photographer, and all of a sudden, coming in my lap was my brother, who is a architect, started doing hotel work, and so having no skills, I started photographing his work, his interior work, his architecture.
I think you could describe every photographer's journey. Like whenever they start any kind of photo business, you could start with the sentence, having no skills, I started photographing X, Y, or Z. We've all been there.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, that's true, because you were talking about the business end of it. And, business to me is you have skills, but boy, there is just the luck and the networking and the people that like you that keep you aboard. And to me, that's the biggest message I've learned throughout the years. And hotels were just like that, where one thing branched off into another. And then I realized while I'm shooting hotels interiors, that the people interested in these pictures weren't just that hotel, but the lamp person, the floor person, the carpet, the TV installation, the hardware. There's so much to the vendors that was just an amazing offshoot, and I've actually started doing work for just those people.
Well,
And
very
so,
cool. So
yeah.
what exactly are you providing them? Like, are they looking for just photos of the rooms and the building, or are you using models in some of the photos? What's a typical shoot like?
Yeah, every 5 or 6 years, almost every hotel, particularly the Marriott brand, but all hotels will change their interiors. That's the carpet. That's really nuts to bolts oftentimes. Even the strategy for what attracts you to a hotel. If you notice now when you walk into the lobby, it's not this seedy bar in the corner, murky bar with a piano. It's right out in the open. You can put your laptop down, you can get a drink, and by the way, you can order food. So they're keeping you here by changing their hotel strategy. The TVs are now out in the open in your room. So every 5, 6 years, every hotel changes and spends, 20, 30 million, at least 5 or 6 million changing that hotel over. So I come in after that, and the decorator, the interior decorator, designer, would go with me, and we go room by room and spend 3 to 4 days, night and day, working on everything from the bar, gym, lobby, 4 or 5 different types of rooms, suites, hallways, and we barely get it done in 4 or 5 days.
Really, that's a ton. I never would have guessed that. I would have guessed a, 4 or 5 hour shoot and you'd have it nailed. What exactly are they using that many photos for? Because usually when you go to to rent a hotel for the night, it's you look at 5 or 6 photos they have of a couple different room descriptions in the lobby and you're set.
Yeah, no, these are for the interior decorators. These are for people to show their rooms off, but it's also for the decorator, for the Marriott. This is a contractual thing that each one puts in their contract. When they spend this money to change their hotel over, they send these pictures to Marriott, and Marriott decides whether it's qualified. They have to qualify to be a Marriott. They have to be approved. So these pictures have to show that this is Marriott worthy, particularly Renaissance brand, so that they pass. So it's very important that these shots are impressive and correct for what the company's looking for.
And what would you charge for something like that? I mean, it's going to be several days. Are you traveling as well?
Yeah, travel costs are all extra. Um, it depends on whether I'm shooting for a vendor or shooting directly for the hotel, because I do a lot where I get a certain amount of pay per day, which is somewhere in the $2,000 a day on a good shoot. But I'm there 8 o'clock in the morning and going to bed at 1:30, 2 o'clock at night. The kind of like what you did when when you were shooting in Iceland.
Yeah, except
Uh,
no 50-mile-an-hour winds there, huh?
no, very pleasant with coffee all the time. But we're shooting all day, all night. But sometimes there's other vendors involved, and that I reach out to them, or we work it out differently with when multiple people are interested in the work. Everything is paid for. Obviously, hotel rooms are not a problem, and they're provided high-res images that they own. They have full rights to.
Well, very cool. That's definitely a unique and interesting angle in photography. What would you say are some of the tips that you've learned about taking the actual photos in the venues in the hotels and making it look good?
Yeah, I think one area that's really changed everything was the digital world. When I shot, I started on film, and for us to get a room correct was with lighting. By the way, I bring a Dynalight system there, and sometimes have to light up a ballroom, and then there's just small little rooms that need 2 or 3 lights. it just small rooms with finesse. And so what I do now is I can travel with less equipment and shoot in layers. And so the exciting thing for me in hotel photography, which I can apply to all different, I do the same principles with other photography, is by putting your camera on a tripod and moving your lights around and shooting one area, lighting that up perfect, bringing the lights over to the other side and lighting that up. If you saw some of my original shoots and how I put it together, it's the lights are in the shot. And it's just really cool how you can take 2, 3 lights and move them around and then merge it all into one just unbelievable picture that might have been 10 layers.
Oh, very cool. Well, that's definitely an exciting thing. Something that it could definitely help a career is to have that kind of contract with a large company, kind of business to business type of photography, because then you'll be doing lots and lots of shoots, or photographers that have a contract with a larger business that they photograph all their employees for the employee directory or the website. Those are great contracts to get because it's a recurring work. It's not the one and done baby photography that you've always got to keep marketing. I guess even that though, you can keep getting them back for the first year pictures and second, etc. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about revisiting photo locations today. Something that I have talked with a few members of Improve Photography Plus about, where I'm doing portfolio reviews and I look at a photo that's almost there, got 80% of the way there and just wasn't quite finished. It just didn't quite have all the elements in it to give it that finished look that it could have. And so I've been encouraging people to go back to a photo location where you got a good composition and didn't have the light or whatever it is, and the improvements you can make. And this year, my photography is about revisiting photo locations. I revisited Yellowstone in the winter that I've already shot several times. I revisited Iceland that we talked about on the podcast last week. And in a couple weeks, I'm revisiting Chicago and revisiting Iceland. My schedule for this year is basically redo 2015 and 2014. I'm just redoing a lot of photo locations. And so Iceland wasn't as hard because I felt like I'd kind of messed up Iceland the first time I went. The photos, as much as I loved the trip, I didn't feel like I got those amazing photos that I wanted to get my first time in Iceland. And so the second time I went there, I had a mission of what exactly I wanted to accomplish. Chicago, I feel like I got some great photos in Chicago, but I'm doing some model shoots there, doing some workshops during the conference, the Out of Chicago conference, which is a great conference, by the way. And so I can change that because it's model shoots. It's going to be different every time. But I'm going to China in, I guess it's about a month from now. And I feel like I nailed China the first time I was there. I got some of my best photos ever while I was in China. And so I've been thinking about what strategies or things I could do to totally change my approach this time. So Stephen, what are some ideas or things that have worked for you when you're revisiting a photo location? How do you get back and change the way that you did it before and try to get a better photo the second time?
I'm still more of a people person when I'm traveling. I find myself doing less nature, but my impression is a lot of you guys are doing the nature thing. And to me, when I see nature pictures, to me, it's about weather and less about the nature is good. You go and you see these amazing scenery. And then to me, it's about getting that weather, getting the weather right. In other words, getting the storm, getting the cloud, getting something in it. For me, it's always about people, and I'm looking for the people, and secondary, I'm looking for the background scene. So people are never the same twice. I have a reflector and a little lighting setup ready to stop anybody in Thailand, Malaysia, wherever I've been, and just get ready to go up to these people, approach them, and manipulate them, use them.
Manipulate people as much as
And you
possible.
can see that on my site. That's what I love doing. I just love people in most countries are just so approachable with a smile. If you smile and go up to them, I've done that over and over again in Spain, Italy. It's just, to me, you walk around and look for the people, and secondary, look for that backdrop.
Yeah, I
That's my approach.
That's very good. Yeah, and I think one thing that I'm going to do this time is really try and focus less on. I think the last time I was in China, I was so surprised or interested in the things that were just different from my home, different from my culture, and so I focused more on the older woman on the street who looked like she didn't have much money, and she had that face with all that character, because it was so different from what I see in my neighborhood. It's just so different. Somebody with a dirt floor on this tiny little street in the middle of Dashu, right? And so I was so interested by that a lot of my photos focused on that. And so one thing that I'm trying to do this time is to get more personality and interesting kind of creative looks at this time I go as I photograph the people. So let's say
Cool.
I think celebrity photography does a great job with this. When you take a
Yes.
picture of just a person, you just kind of, let's come in the studio, turn your shoulders 45 degrees, drop that front shoulder, stick your neck out a little bit, and smile and pop, right? You're not really trying to capture the essence of the person. You're trying to capture the person, what they look like, and you're trying to make them look good. When you look at celebrity photography, especially go look at Jeremy Cowart's photography portfolio. He does an awesome job at this. When you look at celebrity photos from Jeremy Cowart or many other photographers, the one thing that they do so well is that they capture the real essence of that person. They capture them in just a fun, kind of quirky atmosphere. They're just doing different interesting things as they're trying to get a look out of that person. And so that's what I'm going to try and focus on when I photograph the people in China this time, is doing less of the kind of obvious take a look at this wrinkly older person on a poor looking area, and this time trying to do something very different and creative with those. And so I guess that's going to be kind of the focus that I put on this year in China.
And Jim, I really think that, like I said, that it's amazing how well you can manipulate people that you don't know with a smile and a camera. They're oftentimes just really into it, and you show them what you're doing, and you can get them to do whatever you like. And you're right; it's not a pose per se, but it's just something fun and funky and maybe weird that you come up with. And I'm just really surprised how much I've been able to get away with out there, and I love doing that.
Very cool. Well, in every episode, we like to leave you with a doodad of the week. This is a product or resource that we use and like. And the one that I would recommend this week is a lapel windscreen. While I was in Iceland, I am always trying to do add little videos in so that I can make YouTube videos for you guys, and also new trainings for Improved Photography Plus. And so I often use a Rode Smart Lav. This is a lavalier microphone that plugs into your cell phone, and it records really high quality, excellent audio. The problem is I'm often in locations where it's windy. And so if you're trying to add a little bit of video to your photography or you're doing mixed media kind of stuff, then the Rode Smart Lav is an excellent tool, but the windscreen that comes with it is not sufficient for really windy conditions. And Nick handed me this it looked like a small rodent came up and just died on your microphone. It's just this really hairy little deal. So I'm not sure what the brand is of the one that he was using that was cool. But really, I mean, it doesn't have to be a brand kind of thing. We're just looking for one of those really hairy ones for a lapel microphone. Very handy to have so that you can get good, clean audio without the wind whipping into those microphones. So I'm going to link over to the Bronstein WML5 microphone wind muff cover screen lavalier lapel mic.
Or just Google dead squirrel. I think
Yes.
it will pop up. Don't they look like that?
Yeah, just bring a pocket knife and find a dead squirrel on the road would also work just fine. Stephen, what are you recommending this week?
Well, as much as I love toys, I'm as geeky about toys, but I figure for my podcast with you, the one contribution that I really recommend is keeping a pad and a pen in your car. Obviously, you can do this on a phone, and write down ideas as you drive by them, and that's part of the follow through. But that pad keeping something in your face in the car. I get in the car and I look at that pad and go, oh, I got to go back to that spot. You pass by these spots and you come up with an idea, and if you put it down, you tend to follow through with it. And that idea, which Jim, you said about going back to the same spot, is really part of it, that you should go back to these spots and just kind of work them. It shouldn't be just a random luck thing. There is some sweat to get that. And so my recommendation is a pad and a pen in your car.
Very good. And my wife writes everything down with a piece of paper and a pen. I like to put everything in my notes app on my iPhone, and I'm just pulling up right now my photo ideas note. That every time I get an idea of just, this would be cool. I don't even know why it sometimes comes to me different ideas. I'll just write down some ideas of what a cool photo idea would be, and I just have that photo ideas note, and then when I'm not feeling the inspiration or I'm looking for some new ideas, I'll just pull that up and you have some inspiration for a shoot. Well, Stephen, it was great talking with you on this episode of the podcast. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and we will see you in another 7 days.